Today let's talk about the palette system in neotex. This is very useful since it allows you to match assets to a specific background color. Normally when you are in production you have to match a asset for a shot, so you have to match the lighting, but also you have to match the color of the textures. This system simplifies that task a lot, so you only have to use a change of words. Instead of RGB you have to use the color words, and that's all you need to use the palette system. To use the palette system is very simple. You first have to generate a palette file, and that is very easily done. You just have to have a folder named palette. Let me just open here my file manager. I have a folder named palette, and here inside I go all the images I have to generate palettes from. So I have here this Bonifacio Street, which comes from an HDR. I also have a JPEG from our HDR here, and I also have a JPEG of this Hong Kong scene. So it's very important that you have a JPEG since the generation will not take HDRs. But after you have your images, you can just generate your palettes very easily. Now let me show you how we generate those palettes. First we use the word palette new and a string before that just matches whatever image you want. So for example, if I come here to my file manager, you can see that I have the cloudy, which is this HDR here, and I just type cloudy. If I wanted to do the other image, I just type the name. So in this case I just type HK image, or I could just type the HK. The algorithm will match the name, so it doesn't matter if this is just a single name, or rather a single letter. So I just run the palette new word, and it takes a second. And now that the process has finished, I just come here and just type the name of the final file. So in this case I just type a palette and the cloud.pal, and I type the word palette save. If I run it again, let me run it, we can see that I have now a cloud.pal file. It could also be cloud.txt or whatever extension you want. I just say pal for palette, and if I open this file, you can see that we have a list that contains lists of the values that come in our file. So all these are just colors. Let me close this, and let me just do the same thing but with the other image, the HK one, the Hong Kong one. So let me just run it until here, and it will take a second, and now it's done. So I will go, and now you see I have an hk.pal. So now that we have our palettes, we just need to load them. So let me just comment this here and show you the main file for today, which is this one here. Although this may seem like a lot to type, it's actually very short. If we put a normal font size, we can see it's just 3 things that we are going to make today. And a lot of this could just be compressed into words. I just like to type, or rather work, in this sort of decompressed state. So let me show you what I mean with loading our palette. I just type the name of the palette I want to load, or rather the name of the file, and use the load word. Now this load word is very important since it allows you to load whatever file you have and then execute it. So if I come here to my file explorer and show you again my palette files, you can see that it's basically a for instruction. And finally we have a variable, and then we store inside that variable. So let me just close this and come back here. So I loaded, and now you can see that nothing happened, but now the palette is loaded. And to use the palette, we use the color word. So we normally use RGB to make a color, but to match the color with the palette, we use a color word. So now let's continue with the file here. Let me just delete these words here and show you. I have initialized the material for our lion here, and I just created a rock material. It's the 30th material, so rock 30. And I need to put the debugger so you can see the result. and it's just this material here. Now we type our D bracket to edit our diffuse channel, and I just type 20 gray and then color. If I were to type RGB, let me show you how it looks. It's just a 20 gray, so if you see here, and the RGB is just 0.2, 0.2 and 0.2 in RGB. But if I type color, it will match that color in the palette we are using. So let me just run it again, and it's very similar, although you can see here it's 0.208. So if I were to type, let's see, 80 gray and then color, you could see it's not quite 80, it's 0.796, 0.80 and 0.843. Now this is very small difference, but as we go ahead you'll see that the difference becomes very clear. Now I have here a word called yellow +1, and if I type RGB and put the debugger here, you can see it's a color that looks like this. But if I type the color word and match it, you can see it's very different. So now you can see that we can use these words to make the ideal color that will match our environment. So I'll just do a 20% mix, and now we have a new color. If we were to compare it, I think it looks quite similar to this color here in the wall. So we're going to be aiming for a color that we can match up to this part here. So let me just continue here. I have a dark red. If I type the RGB, let me show you how it looks. It looks something like this. But if I delete the RGB and put the color, you can see it's matched to a almost pink color. So now let's continue with our little tutorial here, and let me delete that and show you the final result for the diffuse. You may note that I am using a new word called iMix, and iMix is just a way to mix inside our channel. So for shaders we use mix, and for channels we use iMix. That means take the first item and the second item, and the third one is just a mask. So if I were to show you the mask, and let me put a space here, it's this one. So it looks like this. So I have two colors, this one here, the one at the bottom here, and the mask. If I run the iMix and then a mix mode to mix it with our diffuse channel, we can see that our diffuse channel looks like this, and our material will look something like this. So as always, the diffuse gets a little bit washed out when you make the final material. But anyways, let's just continue. Now I have a grunge material. If I show you the material, it looks like this, and this is a metallic material. So what I'm going to do is just here in the metal channel I will say not metal. So let me show you what this does, and it just fills the whole thing with black. Otherwise we would have something like this. So it's just a white channel for the metal. And let me show you the same trick I did for this material up here, and I mixed the diffuse channel. I mixed two colors that I matched with a mask. So let me show you the colors. The first one is this green here, which I take it comes from this green up here. The second one is a green blue -3, which just looks like this. I think this color comes from here, or rather from here as well. And let me show you my mask, a very simple mask. It's just a grunge 01 and a demask at 0.3 in scale with 0.8 of mid-con, and it looks like this. If I do the iMix, we'll have this thing here. And if I run my shader and show you the result, we will have a shader that looks like this, a little bit washed out. So you have to take that into account when you're making your materials. And I make the final mask that will mix these two shaders. So it's just a curvature and a ambient occlusion multiplied one on top of the other. So if I show you the mask, it's just this one here, and I multiplied or rather I added a ramp and then inverted it, so it looks something like this. And then I run my mix and we have a shader that looks like this. Again, it's a little bit washed out, but the colors are matching quite well our environment. So I will continue here, and I made a final layer here, which is just sort of a dust layer. So let me show you how it looks. It's just a rust material, and I also removed the metal channel, and I've used this thing here, this hat, and then the olive color. So if I show you how that looks, it's just a color like that, and I think it comes from one of these colors here, or rather I think it could be this color here. And I mix it over and then add a 50% dark, and it looks like this. Quite nice. If I show you my final rust material, it looks something like this, sort of like a dust, something that you would see around this thing here. And I added a mask using a directional normal, and it looks like this, our mask. So if I do a mix multiply with our normal channel, normal white plus, you can see it will only affect the top part. And if I do a final mix, it will look something like this. And now you can see that our material is complete, and we have something that could match around this part here. So despite not having too much variance, I think this is the thing that we want when matching a shot. So we may not want this lion to stand out, but rather to integrate properly in our scene. And if I were to just come here, up here, and change our load, so let me just move our text here. If I were to use my hk.val, you will see that our colors will change. So now you can see it's more reddish. And if I look here in my image, you can see it's full of red, mainly because the signs and the taxes. So this one here could match this here, sort of like a camouflage. And that's pretty much it for our palette. It's a very simple system, and I hope that you can use it in a very productive way. I'll see you in the next tutorial.